the richest person in the world. Everybody knows what his name is. His name is Bill Gates. This guy is one of the most crazy business people ever alive, and he's made hundreds of billions of dollars. The founder of Microsoft, and also a very well-known philanthropist. This guy is a total beast, and it all comes from the mind. So I put together this compilation of videos today to really take you into, give you a peek inside how Bill's mind works, how he's been able to become so incredibly successful. And I hope you enjoy this today. Give me a big like if you guys enjoy this video, and make sure to subscribe at the end if you enjoyed this and you want more knowledge in the future.
Fortunately, there's very few things, and most of them are very low probability. Some big volcanic explosion, gigantic earthquake, asteroid. Well, at least in the nuclear case, you've got to say we take it quite seriously. We budget a lot of money, have a lot of people who think about nuclear deterrence, and I'm very glad that work's being done, and I rate the chance of a nuclear war in my lifetime as being fairly low. I rate the chance of a widespread epidemic far worse than Ebola in my lifetime is well over 50%. If we look at the 20th century and we look at the death chart of the 20th century, I think everybody would say, oh yeah, there must be a spike for World War I. Sure enough, there it is, like 25 million. And there must be a big spike for World War II, and there it is, it's like 65 million. But then you'll see this other spike that is as large as World War II right after World War I. And most people, a lot of people would say, well, what? What was that? There's two kinds of flus. There's flus that spread between humans very effectively, and there's flus that kill lots of people. And those two properties have only been combined into a widespread flu once in history. Well, that is Spanish flu. We have no idea where it came from. It's called the Spanish flu because the Spanish press was the freest. They were the first to talk openly about it. And so in the annals of epidemic history, that's the big event. I funded a disease modeling group that uses computer simulation, and that work has been phenomenal in helping us target our polio eradication resources and which parts of Nigeria should we work harder on. And it's very natural, if you have a group like that, to say, hey, look at something like the Spanish flu in the modern day. Health systems are far better. And so you think, hey, that wouldn't be very bad. Well, we tried it, and there are some assumptions we had to make. But what we showed is that the force of infection because of modern transport, which compared to 1918 is over 50 times as great. And so if you get something like a flu, and you look at that map of how within days, it's basically in all urban centers of the entire globe, that is very eye-opening. That didn't happen with Spanish flu in the past. The opportunity to do more than just let it run its course is really only in the last decade. Basically, when you talk about drugs, you can talk about small molecules or talk about these complex biological protein-like things, of which there's a subclass called antibodies. Antibodies are the molecules that the immune system naturally builds to attack disease. Today, the idea that somebody says, oh, here's an antibody, make a lot of it, make it very quickly, that's right on the cutting edge. And the Ebola epidemic showed me that we're not ready for a serious epidemic, an epidemic that would be more infectious and would spread faster than Ebola did. This is the greatest risk of a huge tragedy. This is the most likely thing by far to kill over 10 million excess people in a year. We don't need to invest nearly what we do in military preparedness. This is something where less than $1 billion a year on R&D, medical surveillance, standby personnel, cross-training the military so they can play a role in terms of all the logistics here. This can be done, and we may not get many more warnings like this one to say, okay, it's a pretty modest investment to avoid something that really, in terms of the human condition, would be a gigantic setback. I think the quality that has helped me in lots of things is a kind of measurement scientific framework where I go in and say, did anybody handle this well? What are the very best practices? Do we have numbers on that? And let's get everybody measuring what they're doing, and so they can strive to match what the best achievement is. For us, often that's something like getting the vaccines out to all the children. Some very poor countries do that extremely well because they get down to that local level and measure the activity. They make sure the inventory's there, they make sure the workers are showing up. So for me, I always look at how can we do better measurement and use that to drive the very best practices. For some people, that youth and geekiness was like, hey, should we trust them? You know, that's so weird. We've never seen something like that before. So yes, we had to fight for acceptance. I couldn't rent cars, so I had to take cabs around because I was too young, and you know, probably some people were a little tough. But then as we got a little bit of success, people were fascinated by this deep belief we had in software.
Okay, so when Microsoft is moving forward, you decided to take the company public in 1986. And at that point, you are a billionaire.
Yeah,
close to it?
Pretty close to it. Within a year of going public, I think. There's some Fortune cover that says the deal that made Bill Gates $360 million or some weird thing like that.
All right. How did it change your life, or didn't it change your life at all?
Well, that whole period of time was amazing because I was hiring people as fast as I could. I had brought in Steve Ballmer, who was very good at that, and he was helping out. You know, we had a sense of urgency that we wanted to lead the way. There was this graphics interface thing with Windows that we wanted to do. So I was super busy, and the idea that I could hire so quickly and invest and build this worldwide company was fascinating to me. You know, because we built this thing together from the beginning, it's this great partnership. You know, I had that with Paul Allen in the early days of Microsoft. I had it with Steve Ballmer as Microsoft got bigger, and now Melinda, in an even stronger, equal way, is the partner. So we talk a lot about which things should we give more to, which groups are working well. You know, she's got a lot of insight. She'll sit down with the employees a lot. We'll take the different trips she described. So there's a lot of collaboration. I can't think of anything where one of us had a super strong opinion about one thing or another. Yeah, some friends do bring out the best in you, and so it's good to invest in those friendships. And you know, some friends challenge you about things you're doing, and that that level of intimacy is great. I wouldn't say that I was so obsessed with work. I didn't invest, I'd say, in my 20s and 30s as much as I should have. It's really through Melinda and seeing other people I realized, okay, that is it's really worth the investment to have those people, as you're always there to help them, and vice versa.
So we started with friendship, and we end with a question of friendship. I want to thank, first of all of you.
Well, the modern lifestyles we lead depend on a huge amount of energy. The fact that we can make steel, that we have cars, air conditioning, heating, cooking, that's all based on energy. If you could change the price of one thing to really lift up the lives of the poorest people everywhere, it would be the price of energy. They can get to their jobs, they can buy fertilizer, they can have lights at night. The energy miracle that's allowed for modern civilization is primarily based on hydrocarbons. That is coal, gasoline, natural gas, and as we burn that and release that, it heats up the atmosphere, and that heating changes the climate in a way that's a terrible threat to particularly the poorest people on the planet. What we need to do is fund the kind of researchers who are looking at the early stages of these problems. If we look at where we've had huge success in the past, the government's been there to fund the basic research. That was true for the digital revolution, where government contracts led to the internet. We need the basic research, but we have to pair that with people who are willing to fund high-risk breakthrough energy companies. And that formula will accelerate the innovation at the research level, accelerate the risk-taking, and that's what gives us a chance of having a solution that really let us not have to give up energy usage and yet not damage the environment. I am optimistic. I think we will get the increased investments. If we come together, really realize what solves the problem, then we will make the breakthroughs. Well, I think we were excited that there'd be a phase of our life where we'd get to work together and figure out how to give this money back. You know, at this stage, we were talking about the poorest and what could you have a big impact on them? Were there things that weren't being done? There was a lot we didn't know. Our naivete is pretty incredible when we look back on it. But we had a certain enthusiasm that would be the phase, the post-Microsoft phase would be our philanthropic mentorship. Well, we decided that we'd pick two causes, whatever the biggest inequity was globally. And there we looked at children dying, children not having enough nutrition to ever develop, and countries that were really stuck because with that level of death, and parents would have so many kids that they'd get huge population growth, and that the kids were so sick that they really couldn't be educated and lift themselves up. So that was our global thing. And then in the US, both of us had amazing educations, and we saw that as the way that the US could live up to its promise of equal opportunities by having a phenomenal education system. And the more we learn, the more we realize that we're not really fulfilling that promise. And so we picked those two things, and everything the foundation does are focused there. I think there's two models, two ways that we're going to get more of the brightest minds focused on the important problems. One is that we'll get more people to take on these problems in their full-time work. Now that'll be a minority. You know, maybe we'll get that from 3% up to 10%. And it doesn't mean just going to work for nonprofits. You can go to work in businesses that are willing to apply some of their resources to these things. In fact, some of the most innovative work is being done by large and small businesses that are focusing on these things. So that's the full-time approach, and the more people who do that, the better. And as you say, I did not do that, so those people get an A. And there's a second model, which is that you're pursuing something, and hopefully your full-time work is socially beneficial, but maybe not in the extreme that these particular problems are focused on. But in terms of your donating time, your political voice, some of your donations, and perhaps as you get later in your career and you have extra time, like I was lucky enough to do, then even more of your time being given to those things. And so we can get from, say, 20% of people who follow that model to, say, 60% of people follow that model. That actually in absolute will be a greater impact than even the full-time piece. Per person, the full-time piece is the big win. But in Warren's case, he's decided to continue doing what he likes to do, and he's delegated the actual time in terms of who the money should go to our foundation. And I think that's an absolutely great model. I think Warren could apply himself to these problems, but he figures that he'll use this delegation thing that he's very good at in all of his work to make sure that it gets done. So it's very fair to say there are different models, and that just spend your life on these problems model won't be the path that a super high percentage will take. I think I was very lucky that when I was in high school, the computer was brought in there, and I developed a fascination for it and became kind of fanatical about it, so that, you know, I didn't view it as risky. I viewed it as this kind of fun hobby. Even when I went to college, which I didn't finish, but I spent time up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I wasn't sure that would be my life's work. Now, as the chip came along and made it mainstream, it became very obvious that something dramatic was going to happen. And so my passion, my hobby, and the area I could start this company right at the beginning of the revolution, that coincided in a nice way. And I never felt it was risky. You know, if Microsoft had failed, I didn't have kids or anything. I could go back to school and, you know, finish my degree and, you know, go get a job somewhere. I was very risk averse in running the company. I always made sure we had enough money in the bank to pay everybody for at least a year if nobody paid us at all. Because this idea, I was hiring people who had kids and families, and they were moving to work there, and here I was, you know, 19, 20 years old, and sort of telling these people I'd be paying their salaries. So I was actually very conservative on a financial point of view, and one of the few arguments I had with Steve Ballmer, who came in and played a phenomenal role in the success of the company, was how many people could he hire, because I was trying to be so conservative. But I let him go full speed, and you know, it turns out our financial success meant that we never had a conflict about that. But you know, I think it's great to be risk-taking, particularly when you're young, trying out different things, fields that, you know, aren't very popular that you might enjoy. But I never got into a position where I was taking, actually in any meaningful sense, I was taking a big risk.
I mean, the risk for you would not to have acted because you felt the train was leaving the station.
Yeah, and it was so clear that, you know, this was going to happen. And this was so much fun. I mean, you know, I was a fanatic. I didn't believe in weekends. I didn't believe in vacation. My mom had to negotiate whether I'd come once a week for dinner.
No matter who the guest was.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. You could say this is we're a victim of success. In the countries where you have measles all the time, nobody gets confused about this.
Do you get mad about it?
I get more mad about the deaths we're not avoiding. I spend, you know, my time on the countries where you still have, in the case of measles, over 300,000 kids dying a year. In the case of diarrheal diseases, over 1 million a year. There's 6 million kids a year still dying. Why aren't we getting vaccines out in Africa for diarrhea, for respiratory disease? Why don't we yet have a vaccine for malaria? Those are the things that you know, I push forward. I wouldn't say I get angry, but I'm really impatient that we're not moving as fast as I'd like. All the other studies were done, showed no connection whatsoever, again and again and again. And so it's an absolute lie that has killed thousands of kids, because the mothers who heard that lie, many of them didn't have their kids take either pertussis or measles vaccine, and their children are dead today. And so, you know, the people who go and engage in those anti-vaccine efforts, you know, they kill children. It's a very sad thing, because these vaccines are important.